These are the new frontiers in surgery, and we are talking about laparoscopic and robotic surgery. This is the first section in which we'll deal with the minimal access surgery. We'll first define what the minimal access surgery actually is. Then we'll talk of the principles of the minimal access surgery. After that, we'll take up the types and the advantages, and in the end, we'll talk of the limits that we have currently in the minimal access surgery. So what is minimal access surgery? Minimal access surgery is a product of modern technology and surgical innovation that aims to accomplish surgical therapeutic goals with minimal somatic and psychological trauma. So in general surgery, or in the surgeries that were done before, we used to perform a great big incision, and after that we used to access the bodily organs. With minimal access surgery, the incision size has reduced to a great extent. With the reduce in the size of the incision, the psychological trauma associated with it and the somatic malformations are also decreased. It gives the patient a confidence and a boost, and more patients are willing to try the surgical approach as compared to previous when lesser patients were willing to go to the surgical approach due to the somatic and the psychological reasons. Now, what are the basic principles of the minimal access surgery? These include the insufflation or creation of the space. So in order to access, you need to create an appropriate space through which your instruments can pass, and through which you can extract a damaged organ, through which you can pass your probes, you can pass your biopsy needles. So a sufficient space and insufflation of the bodily cavity needs to be done. We'll see how that is done a little later. Then you need to visualize what you are doing. The visualization is done by a camera which is added through the camera port. This visualization is actually two-dimensional. So that is one of the biggest drawbacks of minimally invasive surgery, that a two-dimensional view is given in the camera and one cannot clearly assess the depth of the image. Then finally, we need to identify where we are going. You need to know the identification marks, but the anatomical identification marks aren't the only identification marks you need to keep in mind. You're inserting foreign objects in the body cavity, then you're insufflating the body cavity. All of this brings about a slight distortion in the body cavity. So you need to have an orientation and an identification of the structures that are coming in front of your camera, in front of your probe. You need to be able to identify what structures lie there. Then you should be able to triangulate your position. You should be able to mark out the anatomical landmarks. Despite them being in a two-dimensional structure, you should be able to make out what the anatomical landmark is so that you can relate to it. Then you should be able to retract with it. Retraction of an organ, retraction is very important as such, because it gives a clear view of the organ you're about to resect or perform surgery on. So the process of retraction is very important. Then you should be able to operate on that retracted area. With the retractors in place, you should be able to proceed or move your operating instruments at the end. These operating instruments should be able to move freely through the port. Then you should be able to seal or secure the hemostasis. So sealing or securing the hemostasis is the most important component of a surgery. You've performed a resection, but now you have to seal or secure the hemostasis, and that you should be able to do after the operation. So these were some of the steps of the minimally invasive surgery. Now let's see what the minimally invasive surgical procedures are. First of all, we have the laparoscopy. So here you can see laparoscopy is the minimal access surgery of the abdominal area. So here in the figure you can see this is the laparoscope being inserted into the abdominal cavity. This is the source of light. We have insufflated the abdomen with an inert gas. This inert gas shifts the abdominal content downwards and the abdominal wall upwards. This creates a space in which you can easily insert and retract your instruments, and with the help of laparoscopy you can clearly identify the structures within the abdominal cavity and perform surgical procedures on it. Then we have the thoracoscopy. Thoracoscopy is done in the thoracic region. This is the thoracoscope and this is the camera. Now in thoracoscopy you need not to insufflate the organ, insufflate the bodily system, insufflate the bodily cavity. The reason for that is when you open the thoracic cavity, it stays taut due to the thoracic pressure. So the need for insufflation is not there. Moving on, you can perform endoluminal endoscopy. So in endoluminal endoscopy, you can enter through any to the lumen of any of the open tubes, be it mouth, the rectum, the vaginal canal. You can enter through it and perform endoscopy. These are used to visualize these structures and find out what pathology might be going on in these structures. Moving on, we can do perivisceral endoscopy. So what is perivisceral endoscopy? So you might enter through a hollow tube, but your aim is not to look at this hollow tube in itself, but the area surrounding the hollow tube. For example, this is a bronchoscope that has actually entered the trachea and then the bronchus. But they're not looking at the trachea and the bronchus themselves. They can look at the trachea and the bronchus also because they're following that path. But they'll also look at the lung tissue. Now, the endoscope is not in the lung tissue, but in the bronchi. The endoscope lies in the bronchus, but it can visualize the lung tissue. It can visualize the mediastinal tissue. So you get an idea of what structures are present there, what anomalies, what is the natural anatomy of that structure. This helps you to plan your surgical resection in that area, or the maneuvering of structures in that area. So that is very important. So in perivisceral endoscopy, you tend to have a view around the viscera with the help of an endoscope being inserted into the hollow lumen of that viscera. These include the mediastinoscopy, as is being done in the figure. This can also include retroperitoneal scopy, and retroperitoneal approach can be combined with other approaches so that you can perform your surgical resections. Then we have arthroscopy and intra-articular joint surgery. So here you can see this is an arthroscope, or the intra-articular joint device that is being inserted within the joint cavity. So you do not need to perform an open surgery. Rather, you can insert an intra-articular joint surgery device or an arthroscope, and through that you can manage your various surgical maneuvers. You can perform your various surgical maneuvers. Now you can use the combined approach as well. In a combined approach, the disease organ is visualized and treated by an assortment of endoluminal and extraluminal endoscopes and other imaging devices. So you build up on what you have. You build up on your clinical knowledge, you build up on your examination. Then after examining the patient, you go for imaging. Whatever imaging you have, you build up on that imaging. And after combining the results of your clinical knowledge, of your examination, and all the imaging techniques that you can utilize, you reach upon a diagnosis. So you can always use a combined approach for various diseases. Examples include the management of biliary lithiasis. So the management of biliary lithiasis is an example of a combined approach. The colonic polyp excision, so you have the background knowledge, then you examine the patient, then you perform perform various imaging techniques, and after that you perform the procedure of excision. So you have utilized a variety, an essay of an assortment of various methods, and these methods have helped you to reach your diagnosis and perform your treatment. Now, urological procedures such as pyeloplasty and donor nephrectomy, these are also examples of combined approach. Now, what are the advantages of minimal access surgery? So the advantages include this decrease in the wound size, the biggest advantage that gives better cosmesis. So there's decrease in the wound size, there's reduce in the wound infection, there's decrease in wound dehiscence, there's decrease in bleeding, there's decreased chances of herniation and nerve entrapment. So this is because it's a smaller wound, so that means less complications, less chances of infections, bleeding, and all these things we talked about. Then there's decrease in wound pain. It is directly proportional to the size of the wound. Greater the size of the wound, greater the pain. However, when the wound size decreases, the pain also decreases. Then there is improved mobility because the wound size is decreased. The patient is able to tolerate the pain well, since there's less pain, and hence the patient is able to mobilize himself earlier as compared to traditional surgery. Then we have decreased wound trauma. Obviously, with the smaller wound comes a smaller trauma. So the wound heals itself earlier and the patient is in less agony. Then we have decreased heat loss and improved visualization. So it's a small wound and the body is able to maintain itself, and then there's improved visualization because the probe is right there and you can clearly visualize what exactly is going on. So these are some of the advantages of the minimal access surgery. Now, what are the limitations to the minimal access surgery? So it is reliant on remote vision and operation. So it is not like you cutting into an abdomen and just getting in there. It relies on remote vision, that is, you'll see that across a screen and you'll operate you'll operate accordingly. You'll be visualizing the tissue on a screen. Now, as I've told before, it's a two-dimensional view, so it needs some getting used to. You need to undergo the procedure. You need to experience the procedures again and again so that you can clearly identify the depth of the image. It's very difficult to actually make out the depth of the image just by that, but with experience it gets better, and you need to be able to differentiate between different organs, different parts of different organs, just on the basis of visualization, since you cannot not actually feel the organs. Now, there's loss of the tactile feedback. This is what I was talking about, the loss of feel. So for a surgeon, the loss of feel is very important. In an open surgical procedure, every organ is right there and you can clearly feel the area where you're going. But in a laparoscopic procedure or a minimal access surgery procedure, your hand cannot be there. So the loss of tactile stimulation has to be compensated for. The doctor or the surgeon needs to practice himself on the minimal invasive surgery till the time he can compensate for the loss of tactile feedback. Now, there's a high dependence on the hand-eye coordination. So this is the reason for all those surveys which say surgeons who play video games are better and make less mistakes. That is because video games improve your hand-eye coordination, and video games are actually a similar medium. You're looking at a screen and playing with a controller. So this is exactly what is going on. You have the controllers in your hand, you're actually looking at the screen right ahead. So you need to have a lot of hand-eye coordination. You should know that movement of your hand will produce a certain effect on the screen. And the greater the hand-eye coordination, the better surgeon, the better minimal access surgeon you can become. Now, one of the major difficulties with the minimal access surgery is the maintenance of hemostasis. So, if a bleeding occurs in the surgical field, it cannot be managed promptly. For first, there's a lot of blood that will obstruct the view. Secondly, this blood will absorb all the light and there will be darkness, so you won't be able to see exactly what is going on. So a minimal access procedure turns to a traditional procedure because of failure of management of hemostasis. Management of hemostasis still remains the biggest challenge to a surgeon in minimal access surgery. Now, it also relies on new techniques, and all these new techniques need to be learned. The surgeon first needs to familiarize himself with the new techniques and to learn them to perfection, to a crisp, so that he can perform that on the patient. So it requires reliance on the new techniques as well. So now the extraction of large specimens is also a problem. So in order to extract the large specimen, if the specimen is fairly large, it is very difficult to extract that specimen. There are various methods to extract that specimen. You can extract that specimen from a natural orifice, or you can use special poultices or special devices that can chop that specimen down. But chopping of the specimen does not give the required details to the histologist. The pathologist does not get the required detail in the chopping of that, and if the removal is by a natural orifice, you need to make an extra incision for that orifice as well. So that's that complication as well. So this was all about the minimal access surgery. I hope you liked and enjoyed it. For further sections, keep watching sqadia.com.